Starting in 1942 by amalgamating 10 small bush flying operations, Canadian Pacific Airlines provided scheduled and charter service and operated 8 BCATP stations during the Second World War. In 45 years of flying and growth, the airline carried passengers and cargo throughout Canada and to destinations on 5 continents. Canadian Pacific Airlines came into being on May 16, 1942, as a wholly owned subsidiary of Canadian Pacific Railway. Years earlier, CPR had obtained permission from the federal government to own and operate commercial aircraft. In 1939, active work began for the formation of Canadian Pacific Airlines when it started purchasing privately owned airline operations. 10 small privately owned operations were acquired, then amalgamated to form the new airline. Well-known operations like Canadian Airways and Prairie Airways were combined with other operations, including lesser-known Starrett Airways, Aero Airways, Wings Limited, and 5 other small operations. L.B. Larry Unwin became the first president of Canadian Pacific Airlines, and 6 weeks after the formation of the company, its aircraft were in the air. For the next 7 years, Canadian Pacific Airlines operated simply as a regional carrier in 6 provinces, starting with aircraft inherited from the original operations. And as a regional carrier, the new company served only British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, and Quebec. At its formation, the airline inherited 77 aircraft of 14 types, flown by bush pilots who were serving communities in northern Canada and remote locations that were not reached by road or rail. By 1949, the company's fleet was becoming standardized, now with 47 aircraft in 5 types, including the tireless wartime Douglas DC-3, the Lockheed Lodestar, the amphibian consolidated Canso, and the Barclay Grow T-8P-1, of which only 11 were ever made, and 3 are to be found in Alberta Aviation Museums in Edmonton, Wetaskiwin, and Calgary. And among the aircraft to join the company was the famous bush plane, the Nordine Norseman. In 1947, Grant McConaughey, the founder of Yukon Southern Air Transport, became president. He knew well the challenges of offering service to locations previously served by small companies and began developing scheduled service to those places. During the Second World War, Canadian Pacific Airlines operated 7 air observer schools, 1 elementary flying training school, and 5 aircraft repair depots of the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan, and provided support for construction of the Alaska Highway, reaching from Dawson Creek, British Columbia, to Delta Junction in Alaska. The extensive and diverse aviation activity required the training of large numbers of skilled pilots, navigators, air engineers, radio operators, and a myriad of other technical and administrative personnel. In 1949, Canadian Pacific Airlines moved its operational headquarters from Edmonton to Vancouver, and expansion of routes and services continued. The company operated an aerial survey division, and from 1951 to 1964 operated No. 10 Repair Depot in Calgary for maintenance on aircraft of the Royal Canadian Air Force. In the 1950s, it operated charter flights for Canadian and American military personnel during the Korean War and began scheduled flights to South America, Mexico, and Europe. As service and routes expanded, older aircraft that had served the company well were taken out of service, and CP Air moved into the jet age with Douglas DC-8 airliners in 1959. By 1959, CP Air was able to offer flights between major Canadian cities for the first time since TransCanada Airlines was formed in 1937. And transcontinental service was provided with Bristol Britannia turboprop aircraft. By 1980, CP Air was flying coast to coast in Canada from Victoria to Halifax and to locations in northern Canada, The airline continued to move to newer aircraft, replacing the Britannia with DC-8s and then using Boeing 727s, Douglas DC-10s, and Boeing 747s, all aircraft that could carry more passengers and fly faster and further. CP Air offered charter flights, and in 1979, CP Air Holidays was formed as a division to provide flights to vacation destinations. Expansion included new facilities. New hangars, administrative offices, and a flight simulator building were built in Vancouver and an operations center in Toronto. By the 1980s, the airline that was formed by combining small bush flying operations was serving not only virtually all of Canada, but flying internationally to 5 continents, and 15 cities were served in the eastern United States.
Now you can fly the airline you prefer to fly. From Toronto, CP Air offers 3 non-stops to Vancouver, 4 to Montreal or Ottawa, 4 flights to Calgary, 3 non-stops to Edmonton, and 4 more to Winnipeg. Call us first. Call us first.
Canadian Pacific Airlines ended its days when the company was sold in 1987, with Donald Carty in office as the last president of a company that for 45 years served Canada and carried Canadian travelers across their country and around the world. The airline that began as a conglomeration of small aviation operations with its heritage in bush flying and regional service had grown to an international airline, serving Canadians and international passengers. Canadian Pacific Airlines is the 2013 recipient of the Belt of Orion Award for Excellence from Canada's Aviation Hall of Fame.